Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. Rashad Davis. Mr. Davis, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure in having you here. I know Mr. Davis is an advocate for educational equity. He's also been in education for 7 years and recently been in the classroom, which is really commendable when we hear about the need for Black men in the classroom. So it's great to have one more Black male in the classroom. But before we get into the conversation itself, I will ask you, please, if you don't mind, to share more about yourself so the listeners can have an idea of who you are before we start the conversation itself.
Definitely. Thank you for that. So as you said, I've been in education for 7 years. My background is in IT, which I did for 20 years previously. However, at some point, I felt a shift in my purpose and a shift in my duties and responsibilities to have more of an impact on education, particularly having a presence for our Black and brown kids as to who was standing in front of them, the message that was being delivered to them, how it was being delivered, and to give them something to see, that they can see for themselves how far you can go, how far you can accomplish in life with the presence of a Black male in front of you who pushes excellence in all that you do, who pushes you to think critically and to just strive for more. And so that led to my journey into the classroom to make a presence and make an impact.
That's great. And I can tell you, the students do need it. And what I've learned from research, it doesn't only help the Black male students or the males of color, it also gives other students a different perception of Black men.
Absolutely.
Because they have been conditioned to see Black men in a certain light. So once they have a Black male teacher, it gives them a different perception of Black men on a whole. So man, it's great that you realize the need to be in the classroom and to help mold the minds of the future. So that's a great step in changing the narrative. And that's going to take us into the conversation. Our conversation will be most focused on what we need to do as Black men to make a difference. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
You have to want to do it. First of all, you have to want to be able to make an impact and realize that you can make an impact. I think for me, when I made my shift into education, it was because I didn't want to be on the sidelines Monday morning quarterbacking about what could be done and how things could be. And I've never done it. I've never been in the trenches with teachers to understand education. I've never understood their perspective until I became a teacher. So for me, as a Black man, my presence alone commands excellence. And that's a way I carry myself. That's a belief that I have. So for mindset, yes, I have to want to do it and believe that I can do it and not allow the naysayers or negative feedback to deter me from that, if that makes sense. You can't tell me my presence in this classroom, my presence in these hallways doesn't make a difference. And I carry myself with a sense of excellence. I carry myself with a sense of pride that my presence, it allows my presence to make that impact in of itself.
Well, and that's one thing I've seen a lot, where as Black men, you go some places and when a Black male is there on purpose, as you mentioned, how you show up. You don't have to really tell somebody by words. So that's great. And the one thing that you said when it comes to the mindset that I really believe is really important is want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
To make change, you have to want to do it and to realize that doing it doesn't require someone's validation. As black
Absolutely.
men, we have to know that doing something is that we're going to do it, regardless of the opinions of other people, regardless of what have been said about us as black men, because that's how we change things, not waiting for someone to tell us or validate us about the things that we want to do. And that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
The simplest thing is to go, just get up and go do it. I didn't wait for anybody to tell me how to change the narrative that I wanted to change. I just did it. I reached out to some people. I've had these conversations, but initially I just did it. I listened to my heart and said that this is a need for me to impact and make a change for positive for Black kids. And when I look back on my life, I had been doing it for years, subconsciously and unintentionally, until the day I decided to just get up and go do it and make it happen. Starting with mentoring programs, starting with just the relationships that I choose to intentionally build. So the advice that I would give is you have to be intentional and purposeful for what you do in your actions, your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. And understand you're going to have to persevere, but you can still don't wait for anybody. I don't wait for I don't even wait for other men.
Okay.
I am an individual first and I lead by example. So therefore I am going to attract men who of like mind, like body and soul. And so once those men see something, then we can do it together. And
Correct.
we can have those conversations. We can start to make that impact, but it takes one to start. And I am that one. I'm not waiting for the others. So that's the one thing I would honestly say is just go do it.
That's the way to change things. That's the way to make an impact, not waiting on others to join in before you move towards the goal or move towards
Absolutely.
what you want to see change. Because if you have to wait, the people around you may not be the ones to join forces with you.
Hmm.
And in moving towards the goal, then other people who may not be in that immediate environment see what you're doing and then join forces. But let me ask this question, being that you have the inner drive to do,
Yep. That's
and
a good
you
word.
said those who, if they're going to make change, they need to move towards what they want. But those who still have the doubts about the difference that they can make, how would you encourage those people, our Black male in particularly, to get involved into the what they want to do?
That's a good question. I think it's on me to give them the opportunity. I
Correct.
think some people in life create opportunities, other people join opportunities. I think some people influence while others are influenced.
Yeah.
And I feel that if you think about any job, someone had to start the job for you to decide this is where I want to be. So while they may not know, they may have an inkling, but not a clarity on where to go or what to do. I say those who are listening, who are like me, once you start it, others will follow. And I also think there are some who may not see it. So we lift as we climb.
Correct.
So as I start it and I go forward, I I will pull others into it to say, hey, you might enjoy this.
Correct.
You may like this opportunity, or you may become part of this opportunity and find you a different path, but you can still make an impact. But it all started because I created the initial opportunity, or I listened to myself and I started it. I think too often we as men, we wait. We wait for we wait for a woman. We wait for our friends. We wait for others, and we never do.
Correct.
And I think if you think about our history from From Genesis, we start. We do. We should not wait. Now, we may not know everything,
Correct.
and that's where understanding the value of good leadership comes from. I don't know everything, but you do. You do. So come be part of this team. But I've created the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so to those men, I say, just find you somewhere, find you a niche, find you a group, and find you a group that makes you better and stronger, that you identify with, that can pull you forward or pull you up as they're moving forward.
I really like that perspective of creating the opportunity, because sometimes, as you mentioned, that not everyone is going to take that initial step, but by creating the opportunity, some who have, as you mentioned, the inkling of doing something within their community will join forces and make that impact. For those who are not readily the go-getter per se, who will challenge the status quo on their own. But by creating the opportunity, it gives those individuals who have the desire to do something to join forces with those who are already on the journey. So I really appreciate that perspective. And that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today? And you can choose whatever area you want to choose, but how can we as Black men help to change the narrative today?
I think the first thing we have to do is stop stabbing each other in the back. Again, if that one person creates an opportunity and takes that leap of faith, support that brother, support that man. If you don't like it, if it doesn't speak to you, don't speak ill to him, speak life to him.
Correct.
And help propel him forward. I think that, for one, changes the narrative of us as a people. It changes the narrative of us to other races, and our kids can see that. Our families, our friends will now see that we are able to stick together. But I also think, while you're speaking that life, don't rob that brother. Like, don't take away from what he's doing. If you can't be a part of it, that's fine. Acknowledge that and go find your own direction, go find your own way. But I think that's the biggest thing we can do, is if you see a brother, if you see a Black man trying to do something, feed it. Give him that energy. And I think we as men, if we link arms, our arms are bigger and stronger, linked, than they are individually.
Correct.
Everybody, and I learned this a long time ago, the most professional of professionals needs a spotter, needs a trainer, needs a help.
Yeah.
Help that person to change that narrative. It means nothing. It takes nothing away from who you are to uplift another brother. It takes nothing.
Correct.
To and so I think if we can do those things, uplift and help another brother persevere through what he's going through and build him up, that changes the narrative in a multitude of ways.
Man, that is well said. And you couldn't say that any better, to be honest with you. Because if we're going to be as powerful as we can be, and if we're going to make the changes that we are capable of making, we have to learn to lift each other up. We have to learn to encourage each other. We have to learn to understand that what's in you may not be in me, in a sense that what I have to offer the world may be different from what you have to offer the world. But I should be here, as you mentioned, to celebrate your contribution
Absolutely.
to humanity, to mankind, and feel good about that. Because one thing that I've come to understand, if you become successful, it makes it easier for me to become successful. So my
Absolutely.
goal is to celebrate you, to cheer you on, because you are paving a path to make it easier for those coming behind you. It may not be for me, but it could be somebody that I know that you are
Absolutely.
paving the path for. So we have to understand that although I may not benefit directly from what you're doing, I can benefit indirectly. So I
Hmm.
really appreciate that perspective that you share and how we need to move as we go forward. We should be
Yeah,
lifting each other up.
correct. There's a lot of interconnectedness in other people's success with our own individual success, individually and collectively. And I think we, for some reason, and I say we as men, have allowed that to go over our heads. For example, like your platform that you've created is a wonderful platform that allows brothers like myself and others who have come before me and those who come after me to speak an opportunity to now find their platform, to
Correct.
find their voice. And now we together are, as a collective, changing the narrative.
Correct.
But it started with the one person that inspired you to start your platform. Now you've inspired others. It's a tree.
Yeah.
That's how you change the narrative. We are all branches from the same tree and changing the narrative together.
Correct. Correct. It's important because we all have our own contribution to share. And
Absolutely.
the more we are empowered, or the more we empower each other, the stronger our voices will be. And I also believe that we will be respected more because once we work together, as you mentioned earlier, the world is going to see us working together. And when
Mm-hmm.
they see us working together, their perception of who we are will change because now they see Black men working together because we some of us have heard that we don't work together. We don't work together well. We tend to pull each other down. So when we start to paint that picture of a collective force in whatever we choose, it changed not only the world's perception or other people, it also changed our perception of who we are. Because we
Yeah,
too, just as the world, have been conditioned to think a certain way when it comes to us as Black men. So I really appreciate you, bringing that point up because it's important, as we go forward to cheer each other on. Because once you become successful, it makes it easier for me and many others to be successful. And if we approach life like that, man, we would achieve so much.
absolutely. I think
We would
that
achieve so much.
that's how we as a people shifted our the paradigm from us being looked at as an inferior race to more of a superiority once we started to come together. And I think we've lost that ideology that we are no longer inferior.
Yeah.
And as a collective, we become superior, and we are now getting back to finding our identity and changing the narrative for Black people.
Oh yeah, man, it will be powerful because it will give even the young people a different perception of self because
Absolutely.
we are their mirrors, we are their examples. So once they can see us do the work together, they will now say, you know what, maybe that's the way forward. And that's something that, we have to do intentionally, which leads me to my next question. Although I know you shared earlier in the conversation that, you were in IT and being that you have seen the need for Black men to be in the classroom and you want to make a greater impact. But I'm still going to ask this question just to kind of give you an opportunity to maybe to dive deeper into what you have shared earlier. But what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? Was it like an experience or someone have said it to you, or it was something that you wanted to do even before you went into information technology?
That's a number of people planted the seeds. Um, Shout out to my auntie who told me maybe 20, 30 years ago that I should be a teacher before I had even thought about it. And for years, I was against it. Um, and then my father, who is a lifelong student, and I realized that I enjoyed learning, and my grandfather as well, who are both of these men have instilled in me the the journey of education, of studying, of what I need to know is inside of a book. And so I got that from them. But then I had shout out to Tony Briscoe, who was a manager and a brother of mine who inspired me to really look into my purpose and find my purpose. And he gave me a book called The Purpose Path. And that book changed the direction and opened my eyes to understanding, to listen to my voice, to listen to what my heart is saying. And then once I started to go to grad school, because initially I went to grad school for IT, something along the lines, it did not satisfy me. It didn't speak to my heart. It didn't speak to I didn't get the gratification I wanted. And then when I got into the education sector, I realized now more so than ever, it's my duty. It's my duty to be able to speak to these young people and again, give them what something I'd never recall. Like, I don't recall a Black person in my educational journey who years later I can look back and say, I did this because of him or her. I learned because this person pushed me to learn. I want to be that person. I want to be that person that my students 20 years from now can be look back and say, I remember when Mr. Davis said this.
Right.
I remember Mr. Davis pushed me in the classroom when I didn't understand computer science. I didn't understand coding. And I tell my kids, I am here to teach you how to critically think.
Right.
So that inspiration, even now as I pursue my own doctoral and I pursue my education, is instilled in front of me from, like I said, my auntie, Tony, my grandfather, my dad, even the brothers that are in my fraternity. Shout out to Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. The men that I work with and bond with and fellowship with, who I see doing great things. I want to be that person, and so all of those influences are helping me create my narrative as I'm changing the narrative at the same time. I don't have to wait until I've accomplished something to go do something today.
Right.
And so I've learned that from all of those influences. And so that for me is my motivation, my inspiration to make an impact, to be seen as an impact, and to continue helping others find how they can make an impact no matter what it is. And if you're doing it and you do it with excellence and you do it with greatness, you can make an impact. It doesn't necessarily always have to be tangible.
Right.
Sometimes it's just your presence can
That's
make
good.
an impact. And I
And
think we need to accept that.
oh yes, oh yes. But you touch on something that I believe is really important. As you were talking about your experience on your educational journey, although you have people outside of school who inspire and influence you, and even have told you, where your aunt told you that you should be a teacher. But you said something that I believe is really valuable, especially when we're talking about making an impact. You said because you didn't have someone there that
Mhm.
you can look back on and say, oh, because of this person, going to do this. But because you didn't have that experience, you're deciding to make sure you are that person for this current generation. I believe that is really powerful. And because
Absolutely.
sometimes we have to realize that because we didn't have the experience or the person to guide us, now that we learn what to do, now it's our responsibility to guide
Hmm.
others. So we
Absolutely.
have to be what we didn't experience for those who are now entrusted to us to be
Yep.
guided. So I think that is really, really powerful and a really great reminder to all of us, because we all did not experience life how we think we should have experienced it, but yet
Mhm.
we have overcome some of the challenges. And because of that, now is our responsibility to give to others, especially the next generation, the younger generation, what we didn't get, so they don't have to go through some of the things that we may have gone through to be where we are, even if we didn't really experience life in a challenging way, but there are certain things that we didn't experience. So I really like that perspective that you share, because you didn't have someone in the classroom, to guide you that the way that you would want to, that you can call back on and or reflect on. Now, your
Mhm.
job is to make sure the students can say, Mr. Davis have done this, and I want to be because Mr. Davis did. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's a really great perspective, and I think that is worth saying and worth remembering as we continue on this journey as Black men to change the narrative and to help mold the minds of the next generation. Which leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Wow. Fragile. That's the word that comes to mind. I think we are at a fork in the road where we can decide to continue to let society tell our story,
Hmm.
or we can tell our story. I think, and as you were speaking just a moment ago, I realized I am a generational curse breaker. I'm not letting society tell my story or create my legacy for me. I choose to get it and do it in everything that I do. And so that's the fork that we are. I think what I've seen, and I'm going to bring it back to education, for example, like I've seen more Black men become doctor this, doctor that, when before it wasn't a thing that we could do, or at least
Right.
we didn't believe we can do it.
That's right.
Now I see it as somebody who's pursuing it. That's part. I'm part of that pursuit for that reason. 2 years ago, and shout out to Sharif and the Center for Black Education Development, I sat in a space with, I can't, 700 to almost 1,000 Black men in education. That to me was mind blowing,
It is.
that we had that many men in the educational space. And thinking about what you asked earlier, we all have our different lanes.
Yeah.
It was that many men that could change perspectives and create positive impacts and never hated on each other,
Yes, sir.
never knocked another brother down. We are all here for the same purpose and the same reason. And we choose to create this narrative to move forward
Yeah.
and create it for ourselves. And nobody had to tell us.
That's right.
Nobody had to drag us. Nobody had to force us. We chose to be here. We choose to persevere through the ups and downs while there's a teacher shortage, while people are running from education. And that's the question I get all the time. Why did I run to it? I said, I'm a first responder. First responders run to situations. We don't run from. So I chose to run to education because it's a need. It's it's under fire right now.
Yeah.
And I take nothing from first responders, police officers, and EMTs, and bless you. That's your calling. I think if we realize that right now the educational system is under fire, it's not for everybody can't be a first responder. I am a U.S. Marine. Everybody can't be a Marine, but you can go join the Army. You can go join the Air Force. You can still find your role and still save the world.
Correct.
This is what I chose to do. This is how I chose to do it. And so when I think about that narrative of what could change it or where we are today, again, more people have to choose to be intentional and purposeful to change that narrative for the better.
Correct. Correct. And man, you said a lot that needs to be said. You know, when it comes to us and the change, and to realize that, you know, we all have a purpose. We all have, you know, our contribution to give to humanity. But as you
Absolutely.
mentioned, you know, and that's what we have to do. But, you know, you know, you have to decide, or we have to decide that if something needs to be done, we can step forward and do it. But,
Yep.
you know, and the perspective on the climate, as you mentioned, and you said something that, you know, I'm not recalling right now, but, you know, you were talking about when you went into the room with
The
at the
Black
conference.
Educator Dividend, right? The
Yes,
conference.
you know, so and the black men were there, and they all, you know, are willing to support each other.
Hmm.
And also, where when it comes to change, you know, we have to realize that you know, our responsibility is to make sure we move forward. But the thought that I want to recall is this: that you mentioned, you know, the black men were there, and you didn't realize there were so many
Hmm.
black men with doctoral degrees or
Yep.
pursuing that path, which influenced you to pursue your path on the doctoral journey. And, you know, I think that is powerful, because sometimes if we're not exposed to what we're doing or the contribution we are making as black men, we will limit ourselves, because
Absolutely.
we see a certain narrative, and because we are not exposed to certain things that we're doing, being that when you go into, and that's why I really like to go into those environments where you see other black men, especially doing the work, it gives you that inner drive, or it helps to solidify that passion you have to
Hmm.
do the work. So, you know, as you share that, I believe that's something that, you know, as black men, we need to you know, find ourselves in environments like that at times, just to kind of sometimes even fuel our own fire, so we don't
Absolutely.
get burned out on the journey, because the work is demanding. You know, what needs to be done requires a lot. But when we are around other people who see the need to make progress, it helps us to, you know, feel more motivated as we press forward on this journey. So I really, you know, appreciate that you shared that, and it's a great reminder.
Yeah, you hit on the word just a few minutes ago, exposure.
Yeah,
That word, when you think about changing the narrative, that's the foundation and the framework.
right,
The more you're exposed to, the more you realize, the more you know, the more you can do. And two, I think we've been exposed to one side of the narrative. We I asked my kids the other day, what does Black history mean to them? When did Black history start? And most of them started with slavery. And myself and my team, Keenan Palmer, Kareem Ballard, like we had to tell them, like, no, Black history did not start with slavery. That's what you've been exposed to.
right.
We are great people
Yeah,
and have always been a great people from the beginning. That is why people want our culture. They want our narrative and try to change it, and limited the exposure we had to the greatness and exposed us to more of the inferiority.
right,
And that's what we've had for generations, which goes back to why now, as a generational curse breaker, no, let me expose you to this greatness, this wealth, this beauty that we had so far. I think, Dr. Cross, if you think about when Black Panther came out, that's why so many people navigated to Black Panther.
yeah,
It exposed the people to a world of greatness of Black people
yeah,
and told our story and changed the narrative.
yeah,
And I think, and as minute and maybe somewhat animated as it might be, the bigger narrative, the numbers to the box office, the number of people going, the number of people, Wakanda, like, it gave you a sense of pride
Yeah,
because it changed and exposed the narrative that is true.
correct.
And that right there that's it.
Oh yeah, man. It's once you start to know that you came from greatness,
Yes.
man, you have a different perspective. You have a
Absolutely.
different sense of self. It's like, now I can move towards this thing that I want to do,
Yep.
and I know I can do it because that's what I'm coming from. And once you internalize that, the challenges will not stop you. And that is
Absolutely
something
not.
that, and that's why our young people well, we need it too. We need to be
Yes.
reminded of what we came from, the greatness. But when the young people get to internalize that greatness, man, the challenges, the falsifications, that the stereotypes, the labels, man, those things will not stop
It
the
means nothing.
generation
It
because
means nothing. It's
it,
just a
it, it will
label.
not. It will, and that's why we have to be so intentional, as you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation. Be intentional with what we do, and once we do this thing intentional, man, the next
Yeah.
generation will be so
Yeah.
prepared to
Absolutely.
unleash their greatness, and that's how we change the narrative, break the cycle, to
Yep.
give the next generation new hope to be who they want to be without the limitations that have been socially constructed for us to limit ourselves. And it's important that we step up and do our part in the journey so the next generation can see through us
Yep.
what is possible. And that leads me to my next question. What was a pivotal moment in your life?
I've had quite a few, but in relation to just changing my purpose, my path.
It can be being in the classroom. It could be you transitioning from IT. It could be, as you mentioned, that you were in the Marine. There could have been something happen in the Marine that gives you a perspective and say, you know what, I believe I have purpose. Or sometimes it's a challenge.
So the first thing that comes to mind is grad school. So when I first went to grad school and I looked around the classroom, I was the minority. And not only was I the minority as a black man, I was just the minority of it as an American
Wow.
in my classes. And I told myself, I need to find a way to make myself more marketable and validated. And so I added another degree to that. But as I added that degree, because it was something that I didn't necessarily want or I wasn't passionate about, I struggled with it. And eventually I got it, but then I realized it did not, again, like I said earlier, it didn't speak to me. I have the piece of paper now, but the value of it didn't mean the same. And so I decided, well, what does give me that purpose? And that's when the thought of education started to creep in. I didn't know at the time where or what in education, but I knew that studying and learning about the history of the educational system from Horace Mann to today, from how Black people were denied, from all of those things, school choice, spoke greater volumes as to me, to giving me value to my education. So it started to lead me down the path of why is it that our students today, do not value education the way they should. And I realized they don't know about it. They
Correct.
just know I have to go to school, I have to go to college, but have no why behind it, no true, definite why. And so it that choosing to add that 1 degree that I struggled in, and even though I accomplished it, caused me to pivot and to find something that I did value, something that did give me purpose. And as I listened to myself, I listened to my heart, I prayed on it, led me to where I am today. And now I believe it was probably the greatest move I ever made in my lifetime thus far, career wise, to be in front of these my students today and trust the timing of my life that this was the right time for me to do it. This was the right space for me to do it and the right opportunity for me to do it. I could have done it years ago when my auntie first told me. I don't know if I would have the same value.
Or the
I
same
don't know if
passion.
you would, or the same reaction, or even be sitting here today talking about the impact because it didn't speak to me at that time.
Correct.
When you think about changing the narrative, you have to change the narrative within the realm of what speaks to you.
Correct. I
And you
agree.
have to listen to it. And I think oftentimes we fight it, we deny it, as I did. I can attest to that. But when I finally gave in, said, Lord, I'm here, use me, and this is what he's done. And I think it's thus far life experiences, educational experiences. The timing was perfect for me to come to this point and now want to keep it going, want to take it off and further. But it all started because I made a decision 6 years ago to go back to school. And even though I didn't know at the time why I was going back to school, 6 years and a number of degrees later, and a number of challenges and experiences later, I, ne- I never gave up on it. I kept listening to I sought to find that clarity in what the message was I was hearing, but what it was just saying to me. And so that was the moment that comes to mind when I think about pivoting in my career, in my life, should I say.
And I think when we're on this journey, as you mentioned, doing the things that speak to us, give us an inner drive to want to show up to do it. Because, there are a lot of people doing things that they just do without have that internal drive to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like why they're going to the work they're going to or the things they're doing, they're just doing it. It doesn't really speak to them. And I think finding that, and sometimes it takes making that pivot to find that purpose. As you mentioned, you could have done it 20 something years ago when your aunt
Yep,
told you about it. But even if you have decided to do it then, maybe you would not have the passion because you may be thinking that you're choosing it because someone told you to do it. So you have
absolutely.
to kind of get into that space on your own when you see the need. But as you mentioned in the earlier part of the conversation, you are someone who love learning. And as an educator and someone who wants to impart knowledge, you have to love learning. So it just kind of tie in, as you mentioned, at the right time when you say, God, use me. But that's how it is sometimes. And that's how we tap into our purpose when the time is right and just allow ourselves to do that thing that we believe would make a difference. But this next question that I want to ask is, being that you share as you make the pivot from one career to the next, because that time it speaks to you and what you want
Mm-hmm.
to do. So, what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men? What change would you like to
Wow.
see?
One, to accept our role as leaders. I think every Black man has the ability to in some capacity to lead, whether it's his home, his job, but it starts with having the confidence and the self-belief that you can do this. We are a strong, intelligent gender of people. And I would love for us to accept our role as brothers, not enemies, as our role as defenders of our families, defenders of those we love, and the protectors that we are. I believe somehow, somewhere, somewhen we lost our way, and slowly we're striving to find it. I think we need to do it a little faster, especially now as a teacher in the classroom, looking at our future generations, the perceptions that they have today as 14, 15, 16, 17-year olds of the men in their lives, it's not a good one. And we need to be more intentional about showing them different. We need to be more intentional about building together, working together. It's all about being together and holding the line to where, as you said earlier, we are the mirrors of the future generation. It's okay to want to make money.
Yep.
It's okay to want to do these things, but to make fast money, it's how you do it. It's the perception of, again, I never had anyone teach me about stocks in retirement, five 529 plans, doctorate degrees. These things weren't talked about. Let's change those conversations.
Yep.
Let's teach each other and teach our kids that these are the conversations you should be having. I told some of my students the other day, if you don't have a 4.0, what are you talking about? Like, that's if you're not there to where your family will not have to pay for your college education, there's nothing you need to be talking about other than that.
Correct.
Striving for how can I help build up the person next to me that we can do it together.
Yeah.
And so I think when I think about what change do I want to see, it's just let's come together. Like let's just bring it together, and that's why I thank you for your platform, that you can bring men together of like minds and bodies and souls. And I think that it starts on the individual,
Yeah.
but again, it's a fence starts with one link,
Yep.
but it's not a fence until you have more links, more
That's
in
right.
the chain. And that's what makes it protect the household or protect whatever it's protecting. That one link can't do it, but it starts with one,
Yeah.
and you build it. Now you got a fence.
That's right.
So it can either separate or keep out. Depends on what your purpose is for that fence. But it starts with the fence. And I think that's what we are as men can become, that fence. We can decide what side of the fence you want to be on,
Yeah.
but we can build that fence together.
And that's important as we move forward. Working together is really, really important. Coming together, doing the work that's necessary is important. And knowing that regardless of what's happening, regardless of what we want to accomplish, I strongly believe that we can accomplish what we want by working together. It may seem as if enough is not out there, and you're not going to work with everyone. That's the thing. We're not going to be working with everyone, but goes back to what you had said. Even if we're not working with another brother, we should not be tearing them down because we're not working together. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But it's
Absolutely.
important that we collaborate in whatever sense. And if we're not collaborating, at least we can cheer each other on. Say, man, go and get that goal, go and achieve it.
Yep.
Because you will do things that may indirectly impact my life or somebody
Yep.
else. So we have to
Absolutely.
realize how important that is. But as you mentioned, man, coming together is really important. If we're thinking about moving forward, if we're thinking about progress, if we're thinking about achieving more, if we're thinking about breaking generational strongholds, we have to work together to achieve those goals. And that leads me
Absolutely.
to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe the current generation needs to know?
As the kids say today, you got to learn how to stand on business. as if you say it, mean it, understand what that means. Like understand that I've had to understand that when I first thought about this path, I could have stayed in IT where it was safe. I already established the path, I already established the career. It was safe, but it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't fulfilling. And I had to take that leap of faith to go find out what is it that's fulfilling for me? What gives me joy when I wake up? They say you have to trust the progress, the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the end result. I'm not always fulfilled, satisfied at the end of my school day, because that lesson might not have went right. I might have had some struggles with some kids and behavior that day. But I wake up the next day trusting the progress that it's a new day. I have a new start and I can make it a bigger and a better difference than maybe what I did yesterday. So I stand on that because I take that with me every single day that I come to my class, I come to work, because I chose to be here. I stand on the fact that I want to be here. I want to make an impact. I have no idea what that impact is. Sometimes I see it today.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I know I may not see the impact of this on this generation ever. I may not see it. I'm okay with that because I know that I tried. I was intentional about standing on business to make an impact to somebody. Am I going to reach everybody? Like you said, not at all. I don't know. I'm exposing them. I'm I have a bucket. I'm throwing it in the air, and wherever it lands is where it lands, and that's the impact of where I'm going to reach start at that moment. If something grows from it, great. But I'm doing it. I know I'm doing it, and I'm purposeful in doing it, and I can live with that. And that's a lesson I had to learn later in life. I didn't realize that earlier. That's why I was able to stay in IT, because I was able to pay the bills. I was able to establish a life and a career, but I wasn't making an impact. I feel great knowing I'm making an impact. I am making a difference. If it's not for one student, if it's not for what my coworkers see, if it's not for the influence that I may or may not have on them, that's their decision to make. What I've done, I've created the opportunity, I've opened the door, I've walked through it. It's up to you to, hey, do you want to follow me, or you want to join me, or you want to walk next to me? That's on you.
Correct.
But I am satisfied knowing I am making an impact. And
And
that's my life lesson.
man, and I think that is important, knowing that you're doing something that you're passionate about. And the sooner
Yep.
you find that, the better it is. But as you mentioned, as you said, stand on business, which means that if you say something or say you're going to do something, it's important that you do it. And
Yep.
that's one thing as Black men we need to do. Once we say we're going to do something, we do it and follow through on it, because that also helps to change the perception that have been created about us as Black men. So that's a great reminder to all of us on the journey, especially when we're thinking about making a difference. My next question before my final question, where can the listeners find you and support the work you're doing to make a difference?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as DRJD3. And those are the two biggest social media platforms that I have.
Oh,
You know, I and I tell people, when you want to make an impact right now, you probably make a bigger impact on LinkedIn than any other social media platform. Because again, you're looking for like-minded people, and like-minded people are on LinkedIn.
yeah,
Twitter is just, I'm sorry, X as it is now,
yeah,
is a different platform that still allows you to communicate quicker, but again, with same like-minded people
right.
of a professional nature, of a positive nature. and those who are trying to change a narrative for themselves on those platforms. So that's where I'm at, or I'm in my classroom.
Well,
That's where it's at.
well, that's great. That's great. I'll definitely put it in the description so they can reach out to you to talk more about what you're doing and how they can support you. So my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I want to have a legacy of, and this may sound cliche, a legacy of excellence, but really a legacy of accomplishments, a legacy that people who know me know I am ambitious and I take initiative. And I'm going to create something. I'm going to try something. I am going to seek something. People, I've always been told, like, I'm always going to do something. So even as I completing my doctorate, like, I'm still going to be looking for that next thing that is aligned with the last thing, to continue making a contribution to changing this narrative of Black men, of Black boys, of Black people, period. Because I feel, again, like I said earlier, it's my duty and my responsibility. And so it's a legacy of accomplishments and leading by example. Part of why I choose to get my doctorate is that I can show this is how far you can go.
All right.
No one can take that piece of paper away from you. No one can take that experience and that education from you. You buy property, you do it right, nobody can take that from you. You can leave it. You establish certain things in life that are become to now be a pattern of excellence and accomplishments, and that is what you become known for, and that is what you want. That is what you should seek. That your name is spoken in rooms that you're not in because of this pattern. Yeah.
But man, that is so true. What you do make it become who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
once the work become who you are, as you mentioned, that people will be talking
Yes.
about you in spaces that you are not yet in. Just because of your consistency in being the work. Because being the work is doing what you say in action, not just in words. But I really like how you put it, where you mentioned legacy of excellence. So if you model that, wherever you are, people will see it, and when people see it, it will inspire them. That can lead to inspire others. And man, the conversation was great. When I looked at the time, I can't believe how long we've been here. It seems like we just started the
Right.
conversation. But Mr. Davis, it's a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Man, it's a pleasure. And listeners, as always, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will share information, insights, and perspective that we believe is beneficial. I hope you got something from this conversation today. Please continue to support us as we continue this journey to inspire positive change. As always, give us your support because we need it as we continue to share with you what we believe will help you on your journey to become the best version of yourself. Thanks again for being here with us on the Black Male Impact.